Rastafari, warm welcome again, honorable family. Another edition of the Mind Over Matter podcast. I'm your host, Honorable Ida Star, and it's always a joy to have the item here. Today we have a very special guest, all the way from out of South Africa. Zane is an elder that I admire. I admire the work that he done and doing, and he's very inspirational, very powerful, very stern in his his way of articulating his subject matter. Is a brethren that is a Rastafari brethren. He's also from the Bantu Society, if I'm not mistaken. I'm talking about
Bantu Soul Society.
Bantu Soul Society. Thank you very much. So I'm talking about no other than Thau Amram Numba. Am I pronouncing that?
Haramanuba.
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 Haramanuba. Nuba is in Nuba, Nubia.
Nubia, Rastafari. Yes, I. Well, give thanks.
Haramanuba. Nuba is an old name for Nubia.
Nuba. Rastafari. Haramanuba.
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 Yes, my king.
Rastafari. Give thanks.
Rastafari, Selassie.
Yeah, man, this practice, we forget our mother tongue, so sometimes, yeah, it take a while to get back into, that rhythm of speaking our native and indigenous tongue, my lad. So, bear with I, my lad. So it's a great honor again to have the I and the program, this Mind Over Matter podcast. Give thanks for taking the time, my brother.
Give thanks, my king. Give thanks, Honorable Raz I Justus. Give thanks for the opportunity to grace this wonderful platform and even to engage directly with the eye and the viewers of the mindset.
Yeah.
Every time I come across, there was a time every time I come through TikTok, come across the eye videos, they always begin with the mindset. And we always say that, the greatest area of our damage is the mind, As a Rasta man who's been trotting for the past 35 years, I always say that Rastafari, we don't need priests, we need psychologists. We need psychiatrists, because our problem is not spiritually. It's not spirituality. Our problem is psychology, mindset, mind over matter. Give thanks even for this moment. Blessed Lord, my King.
Yes, I. Great to have the eye here. My first question to the eye, though, is how do the eye define African spiritual sovereignty in a world shaped by colonial religion and imported ideologies?
Well, African spirituality obviously is the oldest expression of spirituality on earth, given that the Africans are the oldest people and the only race on earth. Everything else is a mutation of us. They mutated out of the African, including even migrating out of Africa and going to populate the whole earth. But the oldest spiritual expression is the African one. We always say we are spirits having the African experience. Now, as spirit going through the African experience, that spirit going through African experience is what we call African spirituality, because spirituality needs to be practiced within context. Now, within the context of Africa and African spirituality, first, when it comes to African spirituality, we're dealing with the oldest spiritual expression. the oldest form of spiritual manifestation. It's different from when we talk of Rastafari, when you talk of Nation of Islam, when you talk of the Hebrew Israelites, the African Hebrews or the Black Hebrews or the African Christian or any type of African this, African that, because those then are a response to colonialism and slavery. If there was no colonialism and slavery, there will be no Rastafari movement, there will be no Nation of Islam, there will be no Garveyites, there will be no Garvey. That is something that comes between Garveyism and Rastafari, Garvey religion of Athley Rogers, among others. There will be no Hebrew Israelites, because all of these are responding to colonialism and slavery.
Yes.
And in their response to colonialism and slavery, they have to emphasize the blackness of God. They have to emphasize the centrality of the black man. They have to emphasize the sacredness of the black man, because colonialism and slavery try to strip us our divinity, our humanity, our dignity, our identity, and so forth. So as a result of pushing back, when the likes of Marcus Garvey come in and start to say, none but ourselves can free our mind, while others can free our bodies, but none but ourselves can free our mind. Africa for Africans, repatriation forward to Africa, So when you speak of African spirituality, you speak of something that existed before there was anything else. So it's got nothing to compare it with. Today they try to compare it with Abrahamic religion, which is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But then we're saying Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are fragments from the periphery of the African spiritual and cultural systems. So most scholars will say, Christ was copied from Osiris, or taken from the 42 laws of Ma'at, or 42 negative confessions, or the Proverbs of Solomon are taken from Pharaoh and Mope. So all of these, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, are just fragments that come from the periphery of the African spiritual and cultural system. So here you are then dealing with a mutation, both racially, religiously, spiritually, culturally, and so forth. A mutation which then, through slavery and colonialism, we were made to abandon the original and then adopt this mutation, which is basically a psycho-spiritual mutation of white diabolism. The most diabolic system, the most diabolic people ever walked the face of the earth are the ones who gave us this colonialism that then give us this colonial religion. So when it comes to African spirituality, we can't compare it to anything else that came after it. But it's when we are saying, let us go back to our ancestors' consciousness in order to define our current consciousness, that we have to be informed and instructed by our own ancestors. Because if you worship the God of the enemy of your ancestors, you are your ancestors' enemy. So we can't reclaim ourselves by going through the ways of the gods, of the enemies of our ancestors, as if we never had a way to connect with the divine. We never had a way to connect with each other. We never had a way to connect with the universe. So therefore, and these things, they have their roots in African philosophies, in African proverbs, in African spirituality. One of the African spiritual tradition of the Xhosa people, this is the people of Mandela, Mbeki, Chris Hani, Steve Biko, Sobukwe. They come from this group of people where they are called the Xhosa. It's one of the Nguni people. Nguni are made up of the Zulu, the Xhosa, the Swati, and the Ndebele. The Swati are found in a place that was previously called Swaziland, today is called Eswatini. So these people, they have a saying, they say, Masibuyeleni Embo. Lasivela Kona. Let us return to the source where we come from. It's the same as the Sankofa concept in Ghana. It's the same as the Basotho will say, we are going back to Nzwana Tsatsi, we are going back to the house of the sun, where it all began. And then the Batswana will say, we are going back to Luwe, which is basically the ancient time, what the ancient Kemites or the Egyptian referred to as Zeptepi, the first time of everything, the first time we identify that there is a God, that there is a light, divine light in the universe before the universe, which you call Rama said, which the white man called God. The first time we identify a name and define this energy the white men refer to as God, which manifests in so many ways, including what we call Rastafari today.
So what the eye is actually saying, African spirituality is the source of all these fragmented entities, the Rastafari, the Islam, and Nation of Islam, and all the other religious sects that have existed today. African spirituality is the source. But why is it not? Why it's treated like it's something that is demonized? African spirituality is looked down on. It's marginalized. It's also seen as obia, witchcraft, some of the worse derogatory things that you probably could conjure up. Why you think that narrative is attached to the spirituality?
You see, there was a time when the African personality, the African identity, the African culture, the African spirituality was prohibited, whereby a lot of laws were made, like the Witchcraft Ordinance Act of 1895, Witchcraft Act of 1895, Witchcraft Ordinance Act of 1928, after the British captured Nyabingi, Muhumusa III, in Uganda in 1911. In 1928, after she died, or after they hanged her, they came up with the Witchcraft Ordinance Act, whereby practices like Nyabingi, Chimurenga, Ubungoma, all these different aspects, Yoruba, Igbo, Akan, spiritual voodoo in Benin, all of these were demonized and classified as witchcraft. And as a result, they unleashed the born-again Christians. They unleashed the Christianity as a religion to demonize these spiritual practices. But it goes further than that, because here I'm just counting the latest part when these things were demonized. During slavery, Africans who were taken out of Africa and made slaves. Because what happened is a people were taken out and made slaves by another people who did not even necessarily have an agreement that from now on we are going to make you slave and you should be slaves and agree to slave terms. So people were stolen, captured, and made slaves against their own will. And during the process of the transatlantic slave trade, trans-Arabian slave trade, trans-Sahara slave trade, Africans, in the context of transatlantic slave trade, Africans were not allowed to read any other book except the Bible. The only book that they were allowed to read was the Bible. The only spiritual understanding they were allowed to have was the one that the colonizers gave to them, the slave master gave to them. They were not even allowed to play drums. They were not allowed to have African names. We have seen in one of the famous movie Roots, Kunta Kinte, the story of Kunta Kinte, by Alex Haley, the story of Roots, how this man was so beaten so hard just to change his name. and give him a different name. So when we were Christianized, we were at the same time Europeanized. Because what colonialism came with triple C. What they call, they're here to colonize us, they're here to Christianize us, which is basically meaning that they're going to take us away from our African spiritual tradition and culture that they found us practicing, and they're going to proselytize us, they're going to convert us and bring us into this foreign, diabolical, sick worldview, which then they are going to put in spirituality in it in order to give it some form of credibility, which they call Christianity. So in the process of that enslavement, when you talk of slavery, we talk about 400 years period. When you talk about colonialism, and this is where we really need to draw the line: colonization and colonialism. That colonization was an event where we are being colonized, but colonialism is a process where we had to go through a long process of being under a foreign power, under a foreign denomination. That itself had this concept we call coloniality, which is a perverse logic that says Africans are ontologically and epistemologically inferior, meaning to say, as human beings, we are subhumans, and as a thinking beings, we are of low form of consciousness. There are certain, we can't understand them, there are certain things we can't comprehend them. So as a result, Africans, therefore, and their identity, their spirituality, all of these things were demonized. And so African spirituality was, in the process, suppressed. You know, and the same time was suppressed. So it was something that was deliberately done as a process of dehumanizing us. And they did it for a long period of time. They even used our own to demonize this African spirituality by using converted Africans. Africans who were converted. Give me a moment, my king. Let me just close the door. I'm dealing with some serious disrespect.
Yes, sir. Today
we are recording something here. It's a podcast. There was a long process of our dehumanization, which went with demonization of our spiritual expression, which we generally today refer to as African spirituality. So, and it takes different phases, because when you study the works of Robert Moffat, a Scottish missionary who was doing a work among the Botswana people here in South Africa, he wrote a book in 1842 called The Missionaries' Travel and Scenes in Southern Africa. In his book, he stated that the first institution that they, as the colonizers, need to attack in order to be able to colonize us successfully was the institution of African spirituality. So they then have to target our traditional healers, they have to target our rainmakers, they have to target our indigenous custodians of knowledge, custodians of our indigenous knowledge system. So there was a deliberate act to demonize African spirituality, to convert us into the colonial religion, and separate us from the spiritual understanding and consciousness of our ancestors that they came here and found us practicing for millions of years before they came into contact with us. I mean, it is evidenced by their own archaeological and anthropological work that the furthest they found that the oldest human is about 3.4 or 3.2 million years, who lived in Ethiopia, called Dinknesh by the Ethiopians, or Lucy by the Europeans. But you're not talking about a being without spirituality. You're not talking about a being without a spiritual practice. Spirituality, African spirituality, is as old as the African continent. The moment there was the first African, that spiritual relationship that this African had with the universe, with the environment, with the great spirit, which we refer to as God today, is the beginning of African spirituality. So it is as old as the Africans themselves. And what is being keeping the Africans? So it was necessary, and it still remains necessary, for our colonization, that we should, for us to be successfully colonized, they have to demonize our spirituality. For us to be successfully colonized, they have to demonize our culture. They have to demonize our identity. They have to call us barbarians. They have to call us primitive tribes. They have to call us polytheistic and animistic people. They have to give us labels that largely came through the Western scholarship, like social anthropology, sociology, and history. So all of these things were necessary for our colonization. And when we say Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, in their subgroups like Rastafari, Nation of Islam, Hebrew Israelites, and so forth, that they are the periphery, they're in the periphery. We don't even necessarily say they originate, all of them originate from the African spirituality, or they are byproduct of African spirituality. No. We can maybe look at the history of Rastafari. Although I was checking a little bit earlier today, I got this book from Jamaica, The First Rasta, by Helen Lee. So it's more talking about Leonard Howell, but also the evolution of the Rastafari movement. And it drew my attention to a book I read many, many years ago, The Holy Pipi, The Black Man's Bible. And I realized that some of the things, basically what happened is, as much as Marcus Garvey advocated practical thinking, there's one area which he neglected, which is the area of religion, or the area of spirituality, which in his attempt to correct it in 1921, he used Mr. Alexander Maguire to establish the African Orthodox Church in 1921 as a branch of UNIA to cater for these spiritual needs of the masses of the UNIA. But also what he did was to create a Christian denomination. So, and sometimes when I do critical analysis of Marcus Garvey, I find that he was not into African spirituality. He was, I mean, you look at the first constitution of the UNIA of 1920, they talk about going back to Africa to convert the backward tribes of Africans into Christianity. So they were product of their environment. The only thing that they knew was Christianity then. As I did say that the only book that slaves were exposed to and were allowed to read was the Bible, meaning that the only religion that they were allowed to practice was something that has a resemblance with the religion of the Bible. And that is why even when we became Rastafari, we constantly contest Christianity with Christians. It's very common to hear most Rasta say, Rasta is a true Christian. You hardly hear Rasta say, Rasta is a true African. Although Rastafari talk about going back to our roots and culture, particularly in South Africa. I'll use South African example because most African Rasta, when they become Rasta, they turn Jamaican. They try to speak patois. They try to imitate the Jamaican way of doing things, although some of the things is their own misconception. And they get worse because they turn against their own cultural identity. They turn against their own African spirituality, which currently 90% of Rastafari movement, apart from ones like ourselves who are advocating Africanity, African culture, African spirituality, African cosmology, African philosophy, African psychology within Rastafari. Majority of the movement as it stands, expressed by Bobo, Shanti, Naya, being into a tribe, the way that African Rasta express it, and the South African Rasta in particular, they are presenting it as an anti-African movement, whereby they spend a lot of time fighting their own African heritage. like they love what the Christian love about Africa and hate what the Christian hate about Africa. But these are conditions that were created by the time when Africans were not even allowed to identify with their African
Brilliant.
self.
So,
Hence, today we talk about one of the struggles is that Africans are fighting to be African in Africa. On the other hand, we are fighting for liberation from our liberators. People who claim to liberate us from apartheid, they are still the one who are actually perpetuating neo-apartheid.
Rastafari. I just wanted to touch on what I said regarding Marcus at the time, that Marcus wasn't pushing so much African spirituality because he was only acting on what he was taught. But it goes back to what I was saying earlier. The fragmented entities of African spirituality is the disconnect from African spirituality is what Marcus Garvey and us out here in the diaspora face, that disconnect from the actual source that the eye is talking about, which is the African spirituality, is the source of I and I. So just to put a little bit more emphasis on what I was saying about Marcus wasn't pushing that African spirituality, he was only pushing what he was taught, which was the Christianity, the Eurocentric Christianity. Him now trying to reconnect back himself with him African self, rise up the whole Marcus Garvey UNIA movement, trying to reconnect back, to the source, which is, the African spirituality. So it's good that I like that, and I hope ones can pick sense from that, because it's what we've been taught out here, and trying to reconnect back to the source. Some things now looking back on it, we are able to analyze and to able adjust, or amend certain things, because knowledge, increase. What I mean? So yes, my brother.
Yeah. No, just to add on what I say, and it's not only a problem uniquely faced by Marcus Garvey. To a great extent, we can also say that about His Majesty. I never heard anywhere I read His Majesty's speeches. I studied in Ethiopia. I have his two biography in Amharic. I read it both in Amharic and in English. Considering that in Africa, we always say that as the Bantu, our languages is into, or the way of them do. So we always said there is no direct translation from African languages to European languages. So it is even more clear in Amharic when we're in Ethiopia, because Amharic, it places the verb in the end of the sentence. If you are going to say God is love, in Amharic, you are going to say God love is. So the is in the end. Exabir, fikr, no. So it is, the is in the end. So, but it is a greater problem in a sense that Africans, even those who are in the struggle, those who are in revolutionary organization, Pan-Africanist organization, African nationalism, Black consciousness, Africans hate everything about colonialism except Christianity. And this became the problem also with Marcus Garvey, that he was challenging everything about colonialism except Christianity. The same goes to His Majesty Haile Selassie. He was challenging everything about colonialism except the colonial effect of Christianity. And of course, you will hear others said, oh, Christianity originated in Ethiopia, but historically it is not like that. not even biblically. In the Bible, in the book of the Acts of the Apostle, verse 20, chapter 22, it said the first group of people to be referred to as Christians were at Antioch. Now we know Antioch is there in the Mediterranean, in Turkey.
Yeah.
So not in Africa. And then, of course, even those who will say, oh, Ethiopia have the oldest Christian churches. We know it's not true. Or Ethiopia was the first Christian state. It's not true. The first Christian state was Armenia, followed by Rome in 334, 332 AD, and Ethiopia was converted in 334 AD, 2 years after Rome. So Ethiopia is not the oldest. And His Majesty said in his speech that we in Ethiopia received first the religion of the Old Testament. And we're also the first to receive the religion of the New Testament. But first, you need to understand the context of it. First meaning first in Africa, because Ethiopia defined itself, Ethiopian Christianity in Africa defined itself as an island of Christianity surrounded by a sea of pagans. I have a very interesting book written by an Ethiopian elder called Tibebu Tishale. It is called The Making of Modern Ethiopia from 1896 to 1974. But it goes and covers some ancient history of Ethiopia and how the Ethiopian Christianity related with the indigenous people of Ethiopia, the practitioners of indigenous spirituality or indigenous African spirituality, like the Oromos and so forth, how they were referred to them as unbaptized heathens. They were given names like the Galas, which is basically one of the Ethiopic names for slaves, because Ethiopia practiced slavery even longer than most countries in the world. It practiced slavery until 1943 and was involved in the Trans-Sahara slavery. Trans-Sahara slavery is the same route today that Africans are using to get to Europe through Libya and Spain. That route that they are following is the oldest slave trade route that Ethiopia was following. Ethiopia had also colorism problem. You know, the lighter skinned Ethiopians had to discriminate against the darker skinned Ethiopians. Ethiopia had a class problem. Ethiopia had a religious problem that the Ethiopian Christian regarded the indigenous African spirituality practitioners of Ethiopia, like the Oromos, the Sidamas, the Hamer, the Guragenya. All of these people, they consider them to be unbaptized heathen. The same way Marcus Garvey reflected in his UNIA constitution that his aim is to come to Africa to convert the backward tribes of Africa into Christianity. The same way that our first African Christian in every African society, that when they were converted into Christianity, they started to look down on the African spirituality or to look down on the practitioners of African spirituality and have negative names for them. We do have those names even in our indigenous languages, whereby among the Xhosas you have Amaqhoboka and Amakaba. You know, Amakaba meaning the backward, those who are backward, who are unconverted, who are heathen and so forth. And Amaqhoboka is these ones who are now westernized, Christianized, you know, Europeanized and so forth. So there is, Christianity has that. Because you see, these are hegemonic religion. Any religion that have the we and them concept, that we are the chosen few, you are not. We are the baptized, you are not. We are the holy, you are unholy. Stuff that you don't get them in African spirituality, because in African spirituality, it's like the roots of the concept I and I, that this I and that I is the same I. All life form are interconnected. Yeah. What we call Ubuntu. I am because you are, therefore we are. Yes, so there is no me and you. We always see that even if your idea of God is different from mine, but me and you are one. We always had that. Fundamentally, when we identify as spirit, that is why in Africa we never fought over God. We never fought over religion. We fought over cattle. We fought over land. We fought for thrones. Who's going to be the ruler? We fought for women, probably, but we never fought for God because we always respected the next person idea of God and look at it as part of the whole. And which is the holistic approach that is coming from Ubuntu. From you understand the concept of Ubuntu, Isintu, the ways of the Bantu philosophy of personal and interpersonal relations, then you're going to understand this particular world view that is uniquely African and you can't find it among Europeans and so forth. So yes, we find that the history of Ethiopia for the past 3,000 years is a Judeo-Christian history. So it's not African history in a sense of encompassing or including African spirituality, African culture, and so forth. 1000 BC, Ethiopia convert to Judaism through the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon, as recorded in the Kebra-Nagast. And then 1,000 years later, Ethiopia convert to Christianity. 2,000 years later, we have 3,000 years of a Judeo-Christian history of Ethiopia. So when people say Ethiopia was never colonized, we think, oh, probably politically. But religiously, Ethiopia is the first country in Africa to worship a non-African God. The God of Israel, the God of Solomon, the God of the Christians. So it can be argued, we still argue that no, it's not true that Ethiopia is there. It's not true, most of the things people say about Ethiopia. I mean, I studied in Ethiopia, even when people who advocate that we must read the Ethiopian Bible. The Ethiopian Bible is not Pan-African. The Ethiopian Bible is not black conscious. The Ethiopian Bible does not advance African nationalism. The Ethiopian Bible is just the same stories, more added with the apocryphas and stuff that were extracted out of the Council of Nicaea, but it doesn't, there's no aspect of it which give the black pride or the African pride to the African reader who read it. So
let me ask
there's a lot of sensationalization that is coming out of the Ethiopianist movement, the Rastafari movement, and the New Age movement, which is now all over YouTube. They talk about, oh, these are some of the reason Ethiopian Bible was hidden from the black people. It was never hidden from the black people. Ethiopian Christianity was kept within Ethiopia. It was not like the missionary Christianity of the Europeans where they were going outside to convert other.
Rastafari. Yeah, we're here on the Mind Over Mother podcast. I'm here with Honorable Toto Haramanuba. We're, reasoning and, some
Emperor who
serious
sit upon the
topics.
throne. One of the
Yes.
relationship of the church and state in Ethiopia, every emperor who sit upon the throne had an agreement with the church that he's going to expand the frontier of the Orthodox Church and convert people. Menelik II did that. Johannes did that. All these other emperors who came before Haile Selassie did that. The only difference with Haile Selassie had that philosophy that religion is personal, the state is for all. So, yes, I am a Christian, but as a king, I'm equally a Christian, a Muslim, and a Pagan. And that is why certain section of Ethiopia, including both Christians and Ethiopian intellectuals and so forth, they had a problem with His Majesty. And some, they were even accusing him of partaking in pagan rituals of the Oromo. There's a book called The Emperor. This Polish guy wrote a lot of stuff about Haile Selassie that he was partaking in pagan rituals, which are basically what you will call African spirituality rituals.
Let me ask the eye this though. Regarding the spirituality, His Majesty in one of his speeches he talk about spirituality being corrupted by African spirituality being corrupted by outside interference, outside invaders have corrupted African spirituality. What you think he meant by that? Because he wasn't speaking about Christianity. He was speaking about, African the source then.
Well, the speech there although there is some serious debate whether it was His Majesty who said that or it was P.K. Mvenga in his book called Africa Unite, because that speech is there as it is. But the speech is saying the temple of the Most High begins with the human body, which houses our life, the essence of our existence. And then he said, Africans are in bondage today because they approach spirituality through religion that were provided by invaders and foreigners, invaders and conquerors. And then he said, we must stop confusing spirituality with religion, and went on to define religion and said, religion is a set of rules, regulations, and rituals created by humans. But due to human imperfection, religion has become divisive and political. And then went on to declare that spirituality is not ideology or theology. Then he went on to define spirituality, that spirituality is a network that connects us to each other, to the universe, and to the Creator. Then he said, Africans, we approach spirituality through religion that is given by foreigners. And he said, spirituality, religion is corrupted. It's by politics and division due to human imperfection. So what I gather, he's not saying anything about African spirituality. He's just saying he's drawing a line between spirituality and religion and explain that spirituality is not ideology or theology, and spirituality is pure as was given by the Creator, is a network that connects us to each other, is a network that connects us to the universe, is a network that connects us to with the Creator, each other, the universe, and the Creator. But then he said, when Africa righteous people come together, the whole world will come together. That is our divine destiny. But what he's really saying is draw our attention to the fact that we need to stop approaching spirituality through religion that was provided by foreigners, invaders, and conquerors. And what are those religions? Those religions are Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They were brought to us by foreigners, which His Majesty clearly concede to that reality, because it's a historical fact. Ethiopia was converted into Christianity by Frumentius, who was not Ethiopian, and founders of the monastic order were the 9 saints from Syria. All Ethiopian saints are foreigners except one called Tekle Haimanot. If you talk about Abba Gerima, Gabriel Feskedus, Abba Panteleon, all the saints of Ethiopia were foreigners. Some will come from Coptic Egypt, and we know Coptic Egypt at that time was Arabs. So, and Egypt had stopped being African for about 500 years before the birth of Christ. When people say, oh, Christ was taken to be hidden in Egypt among black people because he was black, no. By the time when Christ was born, Egypt has long stopped being black, was under the rule of the Greeks and the Romans, because Alexander the Great conquered it in 332 BC, and then Julius Caesar conquered it in 46 BC. And when Christ was born, it had long stopped being an African country. Most of Africans have ran away, which is what today they refer to as the Great Bantu Migration, when they were migrating down south. That you see the whole of North Africa today is occupied by non-Africans, but those are countries in Africa like Libya, Egypt, Morocco, Mauritania, Algeria, all of that, they were black until those blacks who stayed there, they were pushed down into the continent and created what today historians refer to as the Great Bantu Migration, as they were migrating down south. Most of our tribes here in South, they have their history, their oral history talk about their stay in Egypt. They were fucking the Zulus. I have a book here called the Amazulu, Ancient Egyptian Origin. You know, one Zulu elder wrote that Amazulu, Ancient Egyptian Origin. They talk about their stay in Egypt, how they stayed one state in Egypt until those great migrations. So now when it comes to that, I wouldn't say I ever came across where His Majesty spoke against African spirituality. Yet he draw our attention to the fact that spirituality, our understanding of spirituality was corrupted by we using Christianity to approach spirituality. We using foreign religion or religion to approach spirituality. Remember, religion requires spirituality, but spirituality does not require religion. God belongs to no religion. You don't have to be religious to have a relationship with God.
Natural.
You just have to be spiritual, because a relationship with God is a spiritual thing. It's not a religious thing. Like here in Africa, here, all the 3,000 tribes we have here, all of them have a name for God.
So,
But
all right.
no one of them have a name for religion. They had a relationship with God without having religion. And when I say religion, I'm talking in terms of a system of worship whereby you have a day of worship, you have a book that you use as your sacred book, or you have a dogma or a doctrine. So you don't have anything like that within the African spiritual culture.
Rastafari. So, what does it mean when I and I say Africans have their own God, and how do traditional cosmologists challenge the monolithic framework imposed by Christianity and Islam?
Africans have their own God. So is Rastafari, you know. Because much as Rasta will try hard to claim to be the original Jews or the original Christian, but look, it's only the Rastafari who hail Haile Selassie as God. No other person.
No.
Not even the Ethiopian Orthodox Church that crown him as the King of Kings. Yeah.
True.
It's only the Rastafari who say Haile Selassie is God. So meaning Rasta have him own God.
Yes,
you
sir.
know, who no one else worship but themselves. Same as Muslim who worship them God called Allah, and the Christian worship them God called Jesus, and the Jews worship them God called Yahweh. But also the God of the Bible, Jehovah never said he's the God of the world. He never said he's the God of the universe. More than once in the Bible, he make it very clear that I am the God of Israel. You know, Israel is my chosen people. So people have their own God. There's nothing strange about Africans having their own God, that our God is neither monotheistic nor polytheistic. It is the all, it's the totality of all that exists. It's a concept of the all. It's a holistic approach to spirituality. It's a holistic approach to cosmology. That is what we refer to African cosmology, the wheel of life, that take everything into consideration. And this system is uniquely African. It doesn't have to be similar to anyone else. We need to stop using European concepts of God to define the African concept, phenomena of God. That when Africans say God, you must think in terms of the Christian God. No. You need to think in terms of the Africans who say what God is, just like in Rastafari. When we say Haile Selassie is God, probably we're one of the few who say man is God. You know, some they say God is a spirit and so on, but within Rastafari they say the king of Ethiopia is God. He's God whom not even his children believe him to be God. We are meeting with his grandchildren. I met him in Panama. I met him in Jabing. I met him in Panama last year when I was attending Ralak. I met him in Jamaica 2016. I met the other grandson of His Majesty. He came with Jaloid, Delroy Morgan from UK, the father of the Morgan heritage. They came 2003, sponsored by Thabo Mbeki. They were advocating about repatriation and something like that. And Prince Stephanos did not believe that Haile Selassie is God. And Prince Ermias every now and then tried to convince us that, our view of Haile Selassie being God is against this Orthodox religion. But we will always say that it is not the religion of Haile Selassie that make us proclaim the divinity of Haile Selassie. Rastafari is not the extension of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Rastafari is not an extension of Christianity or a cultural orphan of Christianity for that matter. So as a result, what we say is uniquely Rastafari. It doesn't have to be something that someone has said it before. So it's the same as with Africans, that what Africans say about God is uniquely African. Not what the Indians are saying, not what the Europeans are saying, not what the Latinos are saying, is what we as Africans are saying, because consciousness, and that will include the God consciousness. Consciousness is a social product. Consciousness is a result of your environment. If you come from the agricultural societies like the Bantu here, you will have God of rain. You will have God that you're always worshiping to give you rain. You'll have rituals of rain. You'll have rainmakers. You have traditional healers who are able to conjure rain when it's drought. And if you come from the rainforest, you'll have a rainforest god, because anything that men say about God come from the mind of another man. And any human being who exists on earth come from another human being. So there is no concept of God outside of man. God is man concept. So and this concept is inspired by your environment and the names that, and it's very interesting with Africa here that the more than 3,000 names that we have that we refer to God, they are descriptive, but they are highly influenced by the environment that we come from. You know, if you come from very dark forests where at night it becomes so dark and you only pray for light, you will have names that has to do with light attached to your God whenever the sun rises. So to say, oh, Africans have their own God, everybody have their own God. Even the God of Israel was not the God of the whole world. It is very clear, I am God of Israel. Throughout the Old Testament, Jehovah made it very clear that he's the God of Israel. He was not the God of the Hittites or the Moabites or the Amorites. Otherwise, you wouldn't be spending so much time destroying these nations for worshiping different gods.
True.
And even for the fact that in his 10 commandments, he said, I, the Lord your God, I am holy, worship me alone. Make distinction that there are other gods there. So everyone have their own God. There's nothing unique or there's nothing strange about Africans having their own God or Rastafari having their own God for that matter.
Let me ask the eye. Rastas that is aligned to the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, and most of Rastas who are aligned to the Ethiopian Orthodox Church would say that they're only aligned to the church because his Majesty is Ethiopian Orthodox Christian. Or do I view that? Do you have to align to the church to say you are Rasta?
No, you don't have to. I mean, look, my father was a bishop, my own father, Christian bishop. And I don't have to be part of his church in order to see him as my father. It's not a prerequisite for him to be my father. He's my father because he's my father. It doesn't matter what religion he's in. Now, this is a mistake that Rasta is making, because from the moment you say Haile Selassie is God, is what they call deification. I think the problem with Rasta is involved in the high consciousness, high theological stuff, mostly theological stuff, because they gotten themselves into theology, reading of the Bible and so forth, higher metaphysics, but they're not equipped to deal with all of that, with theology, with metaphysics. One of the reasons I stopped reading the Bible, it was at the Ethiopian Orthodox Church School in Addis Ababa at Ulfe Mesalamia. I was given a scholarship between 2004 and 2008, but I studied from 2004 to 2006. I was given a scholarship for 4 years to study theology. But I wanted to study languages. I was not so into theology. That was one of the reason I went to Ethiopia. But one of the things I learned is that for anyone, before they stand before you and read the Bible for you, they must go to study the interpretation, what they call tergums in Ge'ez. They must study the terguame for 4 years of the Old Testament and 4 years of the New Testament. For you to stand up and open the Bible, which is the Old and the New Testament, you should have studied the translation for 8 years, because the Bible, it is not written in the layman's language. The Bible is written in similes, in allegories, in symbolism, and so forth. So Rasta come and read the Bible literally, when it is not written literally, and interpret it literally, and find himself into this biblical theological literalism. And this is the biggest challenge that Rasta is facing, and you don't understand. Number two, it is not a necessity for Rasta to become part of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church in order to declare the divinity of His Majesty. That is not how Rasta began. Leonard Howell was a former member of Garvey movement of UNIA when he declared Rastafari. He was not a former member of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, or he was never a member of the Ethiopian Orthodox, but he is known historically to be the first Rasta. So the first Rasta did not have to be part of the church in order for him to see the divinity of Haile Selassie. But also, point number three is that from the moment you say Haile Selassie is God, because when you say he's God, it's a deification. God is a deification of an individual. Mm-hmm. Once you deify an individual and say this individual is a God, you raise him above the level of other ordinary humans. You don't see him anymore as a member of the Ethiopian church, because God belongs to no religion. There's no way you're going to say Haile Selassie is God. From the moment you say he's God, you need to understand the concept of godhood. What makes God God? You can't have a God who is a member of a particular religion. In the world of so many religions, partial. Christian. Haile said, yes, I am a Christian as a person. But he said, as a king, I am equally a Christian, a Muslim, and a Pagan. Now we say, if he is all of that, then he is none of that. Now Haile Selassie is known to be very diplomatic in his speaking. When his daughter was, who married the white man, first introduced, the white man who was the son of the general, who was part of the forces that helped His Majesty to return to his throne, General Wingate. When General Wingate's son married His Majesty's daughter, His Majesty said to his daughter, don't you think your husband is too white for you? Now that is what we call diplomatic talk. When His Majesty said, yes, I'm a Christian, but as a king. Now change the statement, It's no more, I'm a Christian. It's like, but as a king, now it moved now to the next level. I am equally a Christian, a Muslim, and a Pagan. Is Haile Selassie's speech. But why is Rasta so interested in one part of it, which he say, I'm a Christian? What about the part where he say, I'm a Muslim and I'm a Pagan, which is where we come in? Those who are practicing African spirituality in Ethiopia are referred to as Pagans. That he identify with Christianity, Islam, and Paganism. But in a fundamental relationship of religion, you can't be a Christian and a Muslim at the same time, let alone to be a Christian and a Pagan at the same time, or a Christian and a Muslim at the same time. Now, this now require higher consciousness. This now requires the mindset, mind over matter, not obsession. You still want to stick on to Christianity when the man told you that I'm also a Muslim, and I'm also a Pagan. And most Rastas start to scramble around. Some they say, no, that is a false speech. His Majesty never said that. No. But how do you see your God only belonging to one religion, man-made religion, when your God told you that God does not live in a temple that is built by the hand of man? Isn't it in the Bible that David wanted to build a temple to God and he said, I don't live in a temple built by the hand of man? So what makes you think that the God who does not live in a temple built by the hand of man can live in a book written by the hand of man, or can affiliate to a religion made by the hand of man? You either decide. If you want to see Haile Selassie as Christian, there's no way you're going to see him as God, because God belongs to no religion. But if you want to see Haile Selassie as God, there's no way you're going to see him as a Christian, because God belongs to no religion. God cannot be a God and still be religious. Or God cannot be a God and you proclaim that is the ruler of the universe, but this ruler of the universe belongs to a religion that is not the religion of the universe. No religion on earth is a religion of the universe. In their origin, they were for their people. Jesus of Nazareth, not Jesus of the universe. God of Israel. Jehovah, God of Israel. There's no way in the Bible where Jehovah said he's the God of the universe. He said he's the God of Israel and he's got his own chosen people. Now, Rastafari transcend boundaries. Rastafari transcend religion. Rastafari transcend creed. And if that is truth, that Rastafari is a transcendental consciousness, there is no way Haile Selassie is going to be a God and a Christian at the same time.
True. Rastafari.
Remember, we're the ones who are making him God. We're elevating him to the level of God. There's no way where Haile Selassie said, I am God. There's no way. At best, you find speeches where he said he is not Christ, where he spoke to Bill McNeil, I think 1968, 1966. Bill McNeil asked him, His Majesty, many people worship you as Christ. He said, I am not. And I am mortal, and I shall be replaced by the oncoming generation. But he went on to say, men should not pretend or make a mistake of thinking that a deity emanates from men. Now we need to analyze this thing. These are deep stuff. Deity. Does Rasta think in the concept of deity? No. That's why Rasta dismiss these things. We don't engage this thing, and they bring us to lower vibration and telling us that His Majesty is God and a Christian at the same time. His Majesty is God and a man at the same time. As a man, we have to discuss his marital status. Oh, he was a husband of a one wife, so all of us must have one wife. Although he come from a line of kings, some of them never had wives, some of them had 1,000 wives, and then you are bringing this consciousness to Africa, where most of us in Africa are polygamous, and you're making it difficult for those who are polygamous to accept Haile Selassie as their God, because you are selling the idea of the Haile Selassie, the human, and who must be feared as Haile Selassie, the God. Haile Selassie, the God, cannot be associated with anything that Haile Selassie, the human, is associated with. Christianity, monogamy, all this type of thing. Like the Bobo Shanties are telling us, I asked them, why did King Emmanuel meet Haile Selassie wearing white glove? They said no, because Haile Selassie was shedding a lot of blood as a soldier. So King Emmanuel is the high priest, Melchizedek is pure. He did not want to dirtify himself or defile himself. He put on the white glove. Now, if you're going to think in that particular thinking, you are already elevating Emmanuel in terms of holiness and purity above Haile Selassie. And it makes sense why you will say, Holy Emmanuel I Selassie I Jah. It makes sense why you will have the picture of Emmanuel above the picture of Haile Selassie. But that is not where we are, because we're dealing with Rastafari movement. We're not dealing with Bobo Shande. Now, the movement is older than its functions. And we can never define the Rastafari movement according to any one of its functions, be it Nyabingi, 12 Tribe of Israel, Bobo Shante, any function here. We are not going to define the movement through the function. The movement is older than the function. There was the movement before there was the function. Now, as the movement elevated His Majesty to the level of a god. Now, once he's elevated to the level of an elevation that the Ethiopian church itself is afraid of doing, they have just stopped at the level of a saint. They said, oh, after 50 years of his death, they will declare him a saint. That is the furthest they have gone in elevating him to the saintly level, but they can't go to the godly level. So Rastafari transcended boundaries that even Ethiopian Orthodox Church is not willing to cross or to transcend. And reach to the highest level to declare His Majesty's divinity in the highest level. But there's no way we're going to say this is the supreme of supremacy, and yet is a member of the Christian church, and then a religion that is implicated in colonialism, the religion that is implicated in slavery, Christianity. The Pope of the Catholic Church, Nicholas IV, is the first one to authorize slavery. So Christianity is implicated in slavery and colonization, and we cannot be too comfortable to identify our God, who is supposed to be higher than anything else, with Christianity.
True. With over 1 million, I think probably 3 million Rastafari in South Africa, what the I see as the spiritual and political role of Rastafari in opposed to apartheid society?
Well, Rastafari, and this is the part, right? Originally, Rastafari began as a liberation movement, both in Jamaica and in Africa here, and in South Africa in particular, in the context of South Africa that we're talking about. Rastafari in South Africa can be traced as far back as 1972, with the coming of Jimmy Cliff. He came to perform in Soweto, the first and only reggae artist to defy those apartheid sanctions against international musicians. Most of the elders trace themselves back there, but others will go back to the Church of the Holy People, which was established in 1924, the Afro Construction Church, which was in Kimberley. The same place and address that is very interesting that Leonard Howell, when he wrote The Promise Key, he made his address to be the one of Ghana, and under the name Gangunguru Marak. And then Athley Rogers, when he wrote the Holy PB, the Black Man's Bible, he made his address to be number 252 Nyambani Street in Kimberley, South Africa. Obviously, that was before Leonard Howell. And that is where they say that house there is still contained the original Holy PB. And then Rastafari, both in Jamaica and in South Africa and in Africa, was introduced as a liberation movement. And then in South Africa in 1996, remember, apartheid supposed to have officially ended in 1994. But in 1996, with the coming of Rasbonagis in the official establishment of the Nyabingi order, Rastafari moved from a liberation movement to a churchical order. We started to have priests, men fighting to be priests, from moving from freedom fighters to be priests, hugging up the Bible, and that militancy fizzling out. Because now when you become a priest and you read the Bible, you're going to tell us that we must turn the other cheek. You're going to start telling us that when they beat you here, you must turn here. But if you go to the testimony of African liberation struggle heroes like Winnie Mandela, actually, there is a picture I have with Winnie Mandela. I once posted it on TikTok, and I also have it on Facebook, where I was talking to Winnie Mandela. It's like I was pointing her with finger. I was sitting down, where at one of the ANC rally, I was planning to make a documentary, and I was asking her in that conversation, in that picture, that I remember in 1996 when Rasbona just came here, Bongo Wato, the founder of the Nyabingi Order, when he came here to establish Nyabingi Order in South Africa, you told him that it was the music of the Rastafari, the reggae music, and the philosophy of the Rastafari that kept you strong during apartheid days when your husband was still in jail. She said, yes, that is true. So I was asking him, I was telling her that I'm planning to make a documentary, but asking her that, is she willing to repeat the same thing on camera? What she said to Rasbonagis in 1996. That the music of Rastafari and the philosophy of Rastafari kept us strong during the difficult days of apartheid. Then she said yes. But it's not only here. Most of the liberation struggle stalwarts and cadres, if you talk to them, they always have something to say about Rastafari and reggae music. During apartheid, Rastafari was equally banned like any other political organizations. It was considered to be a subversive movement. Some of the reggae records, like Peter Tosh fighting against apartheid, were banned in South Africa. Some of the reggae records, they will have some tracks scooped. And then you will know that you are buying a 10-track record, but you find that it only play 8 tracks because 2 tracks were considered to be subversive and offensive to the apartheid regime. So Rastafari played a key role and a major role in the liberation of South Africa and in the fight against apartheid. Between 1990 and 1994, we got our freedom in 1994. Between 1990 and 1994, I was part of the liberation movement. I was part of APLA, Azanian People's Liberation Army. We trained in Tanzania. Every Sunday, within the camps of the ANC military wing called Umkhonto Wesizwe, and within the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania's camp of APLA, Azanian People's Liberation Army, every Sunday it was called, with the PAC it was called Culture Day, with the ANC they called it Jazz Hour. And that was a time when they were playing reggae music in the camps. And when we were doing some of the exercises in the morning, one of the songs we will sing as part of running. It will be get up, stand up for your right, get up, stand up. They form certain songs, they form part of, because in our liberation struggle, we sing a lot. We sing a lot. And this is something that we did even through slavery. We did it through the Middle Passage. We did it through colonization, the white, even in those wars of the Zulus, wars of resistance, our warriors, they always sing. So sometimes the white men, they mistaken it for happiness, that, oh, we're enjoying slavery, that's why we're singing. So expressing a lot through songs, because we are an oral tradition people. So it's either poetry, song, storytelling, but one of those spoken word tradition. So we did a lot of singing in exile. We did a lot of singing even here. So most of the time, they will find you listening to certain reggae music. You'll go to jail for that. The rubber dubs, the first Rasta gatherings here, before we have the Nyabingi, we had a thing called rubber dub. Now,
Rubber
the
dub,
rubber
yeah.
dub was one of the most sacred gathering of Rasta in South Africa, where they
See?
start with prayers, will play even drums before we connect the sound system and start to play the records, the vinyl. So the rubber dubs will be interrupted because they were also seen as centers of radicalization, areas of radicalization, because we are gathered there for 5 days, 4 days, 3 days, listening to a most radical lyrics of Peter Tosh, Bob Marley, Banu Wailer, Culture, Benin Spear, Coco T, all these people that we were playing during those sessions. So Rastafari and reggae music during the time of resistance was considered to be a subversive instrument, subversive music, subversive philosophy, subversive lyrics. And that's why certain records were banned by the apartheid regime. I have one of my elders who are close. Every now and then we do certain things together. Elder Jabulani, Trevor Wall. He goes a lot in England. I think we came together in Ghana. We went together to Ethiopia 2017, 2018 during the All Africa Rastafari gathering. We do a lot of things together. We frequent Jamaica too. From 1987, I think 1990 or 94, he was banned in South Africa as a Rastaman by the apartheid government, that he is a persona non grata. So that is the effect of Rastafari, how much it impacted on the apartheid regime and the struggle for liberation.
Rastafari. And
Yes,
talk to
please.
me about the role of the ancestral veneration around the Bantu tradition, and how it differ from Western notion of worship, my love.
Well, you see, when we talk of Nyabingi, which is originally Nyabingi, we're talking about an ancestral system. When we talk of the Ashanti system, we're talking about ancestral system. When we talk of, in Rastafari, there are those titles that are Congo man, Bingi man, Naya man. Well, we're talking about ancestral system. Now, what we need to do is to disabuse ourselves from the Western notion of ancestors. Because everyone have ancestors. Ancestors is those who lived before you. The first date, during the first time, the first generation to die went on to become the ancestors. So it's those who have gone before us. And communicate with us through dreams, communicate with us through visions, communicate with us through even premonitions, So we don't have a word for ancestor worship because none of the things that we do can be defined as ancestor worship. Yes, we have ancestral veneration. And it is informed by this African philosophy that when you make mention of the dead, you make them live again. And that is why all of us are named after people who lived before us. The names I give my children, I named them after my ancestors, people who came before me. Because the African philosophy teaches us that when you make mention of the dead, you make the dead live again. So when we make mention of the name of the dead in these children and say, oh, you are Mkulu, you are Bantu, you are this, we make that ancestor to live again through you. But also, this is informed by the African concept of the eternity of the soul or the immortality of the soul. That our offspring, our immortality is in our offspring. So we reproduce ourselves in our own offsprings. So our own offspring are reproduction of ourselves and perpetuation of life. And this is the African understanding of reincarnation, that we reincarnate in those whom we give birth to. There is a saying also that when a child is born, we say it's an ancestor returned. It's a particular ancestor who have returned now. So now the Western system obviously demonized the African concept of ancestors and religiousized it and actually applied Judeo-Christian worldview towards it, that when you look at it, you look at it in terms of religion, but it's not a religious thing. It's a social structure thing. It's a social system. It's a system of direct natural ancestry. It's a system of DNA. Is a system of bloodline. This is the part where we say we follow the bloodline, we don't follow the borderline. And so not so much into the things of the border that, he's from Mozambique, he's from Angola. No. We're all Africans. We just follow the bloodline. Now, the bloodlines, they demand a lot from us, allegiance among us, memory among others. So in terms of memory, that is where we have shrine of the ancestors, and then we pour libation, and then we call upon the name of those who lived before. But that process is not a worship, and that process is not religious. But that process is a true family homage, where you are giving enough respect to those who came before you. Because if we count now, if me and you go back 400 years ago, then we are going to learn that it took 4,094 people to bring me and you into existence. We are not self-created. Human beings are created sexually. So 4,094 people had to have sex for me and you to be here in this time, in a period of 400 years. If we go back 400 years ago, it took 4,094 people to bring us into existence. And those 4,094 people is them we call ancestors. They are the building block of our life. There is no way they're going to be demons when we are the total summary of everything they have ever been. We are the best of their genetic makeup. We are the ultimate representation of them. And that is why in our African traditions here, we greet an individual in a plural. We don't even have the English word to try to bring it to your attention that in English, it's like you say hellos, but we don't have that even in English. We say hellos, good mornings to one person. No, we don't have. It is difficult to translate it into English because there is no direct translation from African languages to European languages. But what is basically signifying is that it comes from the philosophy of Ubuntu, and which draw our attention to the fact that in the person of the person, there are many persons. So when I greet you in plural, I'm only greeting them in you because you are the one who is the ultimate representative of all who came before you. You are 33% your mother, you are 33% your father, you are 33% yourself. The greater part of you is not even you, because 66% of you is not you, it's your mother and father. And inside of their mother and father is their mother and father. And inside of their mother and father, in them is their mother and father, which you call your grandparents, or otherwise your ancestors, or your great ancestors. So ancestral system is not even religious, it's social. It's based on identity. It is based on personality. If we're going to affirm your personality and affirm your identity, we're also affirming your ancestors, that you come through this and this. It's the same thing that you read in the Bible. In the book of Matthew, we are told of the line of Jesus from Joseph to Adam. And all of these people who are mentioned, David, Rehoboam, Solomon, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, they are all the ancestors of Jesus. But also it quickly brings our attention to the fact that the Bible is nothing but a book about, is a biography about one family. One family, not many, no. There were many families in the Bible, but it's focusing on one family, the family of Adam and Eve. Because when you count from the family of Jesus, which is Jesus, the son of Joseph and Mary, it's one family. It goes all the way to Adam and Eve. It's one family. It doesn't take into consideration these other families they came across, the Amorites, the Hittites, the whatever. So when you read the Bible, you are basically reading a biography of one family, which is the family of Adam and Eve. But this family is not uniquely to them. All of us have a bloodline. All of us have lineages. All of us, we have a way that connects us to the first ancestor. And that way is ancestral system, which is basically a way of mapping our presence on earth and be able to tell you that, oh, your ancestor who lived 100 years ago is so-and-so, your ancestor who lived 200 years ago is so-and-so, your people, this is their totem, or the totem they're using, they change it during the migrations, or the wars, or the misplacement, or genocide, or slavery. But all of these have to do with identity. It's all about identity.
Rastafari. There I speak about family and the Bible being, just speaking about one family. The I also is someone who, boldly speak about polygamy as ancestral practice. How do the I respond to people who critique that label as a patriarchal thing or a regressive type of thing?
Well, it's because they don't understand. You see, polygamy benefit women more than men. Polygamy is not about men having many women, but it's about every woman having a husband. We have more women than men. And if we go on by this Western monogamy, Christian monogamy, toxic monogamy, that a man must be just a husband of one wife, many women will be left without a man in their life. And then they will continue to perpetuate this phenomena of the side chick. They were going to perpetuate this phenomena of cheating and so forth, because men by nature, particularly the African man is naturally heterosexual. As a heterosexual male, he's by nature polygamous. He's by nature a man of more than one partner. It's been proven through history. When you see the African man being monogamous with one woman, is either socialized through the society he grew up in, which is influenced by Christianity and Christian monogamy. Is either socialization or religiousization, or because of he's a Christian, and his Christian religion said he must have one woman. And the same thing that Rasta has adopted, because Rasta is trying to adopt the religion of Haile Selassie as a foundation of their Rastafari liberty, and still turn around and say Rastafari is not a religion, but the foundation of their liberty is a religious, because they are using the Bible and they're using Christian examples, and they are using the Ethiopian Orthodox matrimonial system or marriage of Haile Selassie. But if you go beyond this religious thing and look at it holistically, you're going to understand that a man, by his nature, men on a daily basis produce millions of sperm. Man is the only creature that God created to have sex every day. Women, they go through their periods. Women, they go through pregnancy. Someone during pregnancy, they don't sleep with men because the society they come from or the culture they come from, they say, if the child inside of the womb is a boy, then the father is committing sodomy with his child. And if the child inside the womb is a girl, then the father is committing incest with his daughter. And something further after pregnancy, during breastfeeding, and all those first 2 to 3 years, they don't engage in sexual intercourse as long as they're still breastfeeding their children. So a man who should be catered for is not patriarchy's biology. His biology is designed that way. And that is where we say our biology, our ideology should be our biology. What guides our ideology should be our biology, not something that is not biologically connected with us, like patriarchy. Patriarchy is not biological. There is nothing, patriarchy is not inspired by biology, it's inspired by ideas, Western chauvinism, among others, ideas to dominate women and so forth. Now, when you speak of polygamy, you're not speaking of something that comes from an ideology. You speak of something that comes out of biology. You're speaking of biology tells us that we have more women than men. It's biology. It's not ideology. It's just the way it is. You can go to any hospital and you look at, you go to the labor ward where women are giving birth and ask them the statistics. You're only to find, but by any other time, that the children who were born there are more girls than boys. Now we're living in a society that is more obsessed with empowering women. They say they are correcting the mistakes of patriarchy. Our women are over-empowered, and as a result, they find it difficult to find their partners because they start to say, oh, I'm an independent and powerful woman. I intimidate men. Men are afraid of approaching me because I'm over accomplished. I move with my car, I have my house, I have my salary. So it's creating more problem because it's not a society based on balance. And it's not based on biology. It is based on ideology. And this ideology is today referred to as patriarchy and as something very evil. The people who are opposing patriarchy, they are themselves advocating matriarchy, which is another form of extremity. And that is not how the African society worked. The African society was based on balance, what you call ma'at, harmony, justice, and order, among other things. It was a Ma'atian civilization. Now, which was always looking at the balance of the male and the female, and not balance in a Western concept of balance or in a Judeo-Christian concept of balance, like how Rasta said, oh, because His Majesty have this one wife called Empress Mene, so therefore, they say it's balance. When Rasta talk about balance, they usually talk about this monogamous marriage, but that is not balance. Balance is that there must be equity and equality and equal distribution of male energy among the female. Hence, I say that polygamy is not even about men having men, women. Polygamy is about every woman having a man. And in the African culture here, like if you read one of these books, In Love of My Children, by Credo Mutwa, it tells about the evolution of polygamy in the African societies, that it was established by women. It's not part of a patriarchal society. It's part of matriarchal society. When Africa was ruled by women, these women, they knew they formed part of the midwife. They knew that they were the ones responsible for census among their communities. And they always come to the conclusion that there are more women than men. Even our proverbs, our idioms, our witty sayings that justify polygamy, they are very feminine. When you hear the proverbs that are talking about polygamy, they are very feminine. They talk about men is an X that we borrow each other. Now, men can't say that. Men can't say men is an X, we borrow each other, unless those men are Batman. But now, if you're looking at it from where it was uttered, these were women saying, Man is an X, we borrow each other. Man is a mist that fall by the night and cover everywhere. Man is this man. So they are very feminine, even the proverbs that justify polygamy. Remember that the West is fundamentally homosexual and Africa is fundamentally heterosexual. The African man in a normal African society is either polygamous or promiscuous, but he's never monogamous. He's never been the husband of one wife. There's no record before slavery of the African man being monogamous. There were a lot of cultural expectation that expected him to have more than one wife, to take care of other women within the society he lived in. You know, the widows, or if his wife is barren, he need to take another wife. And not put away the other because they did not allow a system of divorce and so on. So usually, which we find it very strange, usually it's always monogamy questioning polygamy. You never found polygamy questioning monogamy and say, are you normal? In a world where there are so many women, why do you say men must only have one? What's going to happen to these other women? Is it really normality? You don't find polygamy doing that. But you find monogamy not only questioning polygamy, but even defining polygamy, even prescribing it. Sometimes they tell that, okay, fine, we will allow it only if it is so and so and so, or only if it is done this way, this way, this way. But these are monogamy. And the most problems we have in the world come from monogamy. Even the first sin, according to the Bible, the first sin came from a monogamous family, the family of Adam and Eve. There was just one man and one woman and two spoiled brats, and then one killed one another, the other one killed his brother, and then the world was plunged into sin. So we don't even biblically have the good example of monogamy, but we have a lot of examples of polygamy biblically, that some of those men who were in polygamy, one of them was called a friend of God, Abraham, is referred to as a friend of God. Another one was called the heart of God, King David. The other one was called the wisest man on earth ever, Solomon.
Solomon, yeah.
Yeah. You know, actually, all those polygamous men in the Bible, they never even offended God. And all monogamous men in the Bible, they've all sinned against God from Adam. So we are sold this idea of monogamy as perfect. But if you study it closely, it's not a perfect system of relationship. And it has produced this side chick phenomena. It has produced the Ben 10 phenomena. It has produced the gold digger phenomena. It has produced all type of dysfunctional European psychological tendencies that are defining the black man and the black woman's relationship.
How do African women participate in a shape polygamous tradition, contrary to colonial narrative of victimization or victimhood?
Well, I'll give you an example that is close to home. I grew up in a polygamous family. My father had 9 wives and 52 of us.
Wow.
So I have 51 siblings, brothers and sisters.
Wow.
His father had 12 wives. And his father's father, my great-grandfather, had 14 wives. I can count to, I'm the 7th generation to the way I can count of polygamous men. And what I found is that polygamy is determined by different factors. Sometimes it's determined by the fact that the first wife is barren, or you went and get yourself a Zulu woman while you are not a Zulu man, while you are a different ethnic group, maybe you are a Xhosa, and then your ancestors tell you that no, you want the wife of our choice. or maybe you are from the royal family and then they want the royal blood among the wives. So there's always been many reasons. But I've seen, even in my own context, that women who become part of polygamy, they do so voluntarily. Some will say the first wife had no choice. You know, you just come and tell her that I'm taking the second wife. But if you did tell her from the beginning that me, I'm a polygamous man, I'm going to marry more other wives after you, she's got a choice to stay or to leave. But the second wife and the third wife and the fourth wife, they made a choice. They knew, you told them there's someone here. And they come willingly and said, okay, I'll be the second wife, I'll be the third wife, I'll be the fourth wife. I mean, even until yesterday, I get a woman who approach me and say, can I be one of your wives? Not me approaching them, but them saying, can I be one of your wives, you know? But, you know, I'm sterile now. I've got 4 kids. I don't want to make babies anymore, but I just want to be one of your wives. And biblically, in the book of Isaiah, verse 1, the Bible is saying, in the last days, 7 women shall take hold of one man, and they shall come with their food and their clothes. It's different from how the relationship is set up today, you know. Today, you have to be rich to date a broke woman here in Africa. You have to be very rich to date a broke woman. A broke woman who every now and then say you are broke for being unable to do for her what she can't do for herself. Who spend a lot of time gaslighting you, emotionally blackmailing you, and guilt-tripping you. Women that today when you say, I love you, already you owe them something. Automatically you owe them their bills, things that they were paying for themselves before they meet you, they start to ask you to pay for them. So this is a different type of women that we're having now. Different from what the prophecy is talking about, because the prophecy is talking about women who will come with their food and their clothes. The only thing they want is inclusion. We just want to be called by your name. We just want to be like others who are called by your name.
But they're actually
So here
bringing
they are telling
something to
us
the
of
table.
Yeah?
They're actually bringing something. They're not just coming to take something.
They are bringing something to the table.
Yeah.
Unlike the ones of today, they bring nothing to the table,
Yeah,
and when they
yeah.
go, they want to take the whole table with them.
Yes.
You know, they want to take the whole table and go with it. So here you are talking about people who are bringing something to the table. So you're not talking about welfare system, because people today, they say, you have 4 women, how do you maintain them? You don't have to maintain them, they're not children. You and them must maintain the family. You and them must create a family. So right now they're talking about polygamy as if it's a welfare system. The questions they have is like, how are you able to take care of them? No, you're not supposed to. Everybody must take care of them. Otherwise, every woman must be taking care of their fathers. Then we'll bring them to earth here. So in the world today where women are so super empowered, taking care of them should not be your number one issue for you to have a woman in your life. If she's well off than you still have to take care of her. Or are we saying, so these things reduce relationship to welfare system. But that is not what the Bible is talking about. The Bible in the book of Isaiah verse 4 is talking about women who come with their own food and their own clothes.
It's very interesting that they said that, because when you look, and even Proverbs itself, that scripture, and when it speak about the woman, it tell you about this woman. She is someone who rise up early in the morning. You know, she's a merchant ships. You know what I mean? She provide for her family while her
Yeah.
kingman is at home. So is a level of overstanding which I think a lot don't understand, because the narrative that like us in the diaspora out here and probably for a lot of ones who haven't traveled to Africa to have a better understanding, the narrative is towards polygamy is it's always the woman choice, and you have to be in a stable financial situation to manage, 4 or 5 wife and so forth. That is the narrative that we out here have, and that is even contrary to what the I is explaining here, my lord. So,
Yes, my lord, because it's a Western concept of relationship. You must remember that when it comes to Black people, when it comes to African, we must always look at the effect of colonialism. When it comes to colonialism, we deal with the most sophisticated system of deception that has deceived Black people and put them into false consciousness. They falsify our consciousness. Even those who talk about the African consciousness, what they are basically saying is a European consciousness dressed up in African clothes. And they call it the African consciousness, whereby all of these expectations are very Eurocentric. Because in the African system, even when you propose love to a woman, it wasn't like, I love you, or romance, or give them red flowers. Every time when there is a Valentine's Day, when they are telling us that there was this European, this white man who came first with the principles of love, St. Valentine's or whatever, I always bring up the 22 secret and sacred laws of love among the Bantu. That we had 22 secret and sacred laws of love. We had principles of love, which got nothing to do with our modern understanding of love, whereby today we love one another like Europeans. We even have sex like Europeans. Our concept of relationship is very Eurocentric. And therefore come up with those things of, he must take care of you. So when we used to propose love to the woman in the traditional African setting, you were saying to the woman, we want you to come and become part of us, and we become part of you. We want you to come and warm up our home, because the woman transformed the house into a home.
true.
The house is just a building, but a home is a place where there are curtains, there are beds, there is warmth. So she's responsible for warmth. So her presence in your life, even mostly, is still very common. The other day, not long ago, before I talked to the eye, not long ago, a couple of hours ago, I was scrolling through TikTok. There is a ceremony during marriage where they call uglaya, or to give instructions, whereby either the elderly women are instructing the newly married bride, the new young wife. One of the things is like, you know what, in marriage you don't get angry. In marriage you don't lie in bed with your panty and your tight and your pajamas and your tracksuit. In marriage, you can only get sick from here to here, but from here going down, you are never sick. Meaning to say, you must always provide to your husband what you want. Now, these are things coming out of African tradition. They don't come out of patriarchy, and they are not patriarchal. And this is women telling women about the role and duties of women in marriage. Now, one of the things people don't understand is that even sexually, women enjoy sex more than men. accordingly, based on statistics and so forth. But traditionally, they have to put it in such a way to remind that woman that one of the duties you must never deny to your man is your sexual duties, among others. But there's so many other things that the woman is instructed to do. But those things, you still find them as remnants of the African culture in certain societies that are not completely Europeanized. Particularly those of us here who still doing mixed marriages. We Africans do two type of marriages. There is a European marriage we make, which we call white wedding, which is basically justifying or legitimizing your marriage. You feel like if you did that one, it's a proper marriage. And then we always have this one we call traditional wedding, which we basically doing that to make sure that we appease our ancestors and we appease just the African in us, that we've done something African. But beyond just a window dressing, appeasement, something you do for a day, if you go to the depth of it, that actually defines what is a marriage among us. And what is marriage among us is not the same as what the European define as marriage. And what the Europeans can't understand, they quickly term it patriarchy. Because they don't understand, how does it go like this? We have a very balanced system of doing things. Like when it comes to agriculture. Agriculture is a feminine profession in our African culture. It's women who are doing agriculture and men are doing the hunting and the taking care of the livestock, going out with cattle, going out with goats, going out with all of that. So we have individualized labor and individualized responsibility. And if you don't know these things, coming with Western mindset and critiquing it from the Western thinking, you're going to think, oh, this is patriarchy and this is oppressive to women.
True. Two more questions because I know the time is, moving. In what way did European custom distort African family structures, and how can I and I reclaim indigenous model of kingship and marriage?
Well, you see, this is a thing we need to understand when it comes to colonialism. That colonialism was not only, we talked about colonialism in relation to religion, so it was not only a religious imposition, it was not only a political imposition, but it was also a social structure imposition. The structure of the society was imposed. The Western structure of society was imposed. And structurally, even when our fathers move away from the rural area to the urban areas that are structured in the shape of Soweto, in the shape of Umlazi in Durban, or Mdantsane in East London, or Khayelitsha, or Langa in Cape Town, the structure of these black reservations or black reserves, which they call it location, or a glorified black concentration camp. The structure of them, they were designed to impose monogamy, because you are put in a house where you have a 2-bedroom for your wife and the children. But you come from the rural area before you migrate to the urban area to work in the white man's mines and white man's factories and white man's companies, corporate companies. You are moved, you come from an area whereby you had a huge homestead with about 8 houses for your 8 wives, or 7 houses for your 7 wives. They impose what they call the poll tax, that every adult in the family must pay tax. And then there was another tax called the hut tax, meaning every hut, every house in the homestead must pay tax. So you must pay tax for every house in your homestead. Now, after our ancestors, they have paid with all their money, then they had to pay with their cattle. After their cattle are depleted, they've got nothing to pay. They had to go now to the urban areas, move away from the rural area to go and sell their labor cheap in the white man's mines, in the white man's factories, in the white man's farms. And while they're selling their labor there, they builded them a place for them to stay, and it's only one wife who can come. So structurally, they impose monogamy. Structurally, they fought polygamy. One of the structural adjustment program that they imposed on us as a way of fighting polygamy was also Christianity, because Christianity advocated monogamy, one man, one woman, and so forth. And one of the other means was Western society. The structure of Western society was imposed, which was also monogamous, which was the expectations are that you should just have one wife. And if you say you have two wives, you are looked down on. It's like you're backward, you're barbaric. Like even today, people are trying to paint African culture and its practices like polygamy under the paint and the brush of of Western monogamy, and using concepts like patriarchy. Like, oh, this is a patriarchal tradition, it oppresses women.
Rastafari.
That's
Yes, my
key.
king. Me have two more questions, but my sister, the time. But
I can ask that two more
yeah,
questions.
all right, two more questions. How do I view land without compensation? Mm.
The problem. It's a serious problem because you see, when you look, and it starts with the ANC document called the Freedom Charter, which was drafted in 1955 by about 5 Jews in the ANC, 5 white people in the ANC, where it says South Africa belongs to all who live in it. So they wanted to protect the white theft even by law, to say we have no colonizers and settlers. We have no indigenous, we have no natives, we just have South Africans. And they've been trying to do that. The concept of South Africa, which is everything about being South African, it is against our Africanness. We have to forget about memories. We have to forget about identity. We have to forget about our culture. We have to forget about our spirituality. We have to forget about our own concept of God. And we have to even think it is unnecessary for us to have a secret society. In a normal society, you have different, it's like concentric circle within a circle, and another one, they go like that. Now, within this circle, the most outer circle is about economics. The second one is about politics. The third one is about culture. And the fourth one, because in the midst of our culture is spirituality, or the nucleus of our culture is spirituality. So the next one will be spirituality. And the next one will be our concept of God, informed by our culture. That what is our notion of God? What is our concept of God? And then the sixth one will be secret society. Secret and sacred societies. So we normally have secret societies. It's only Europeans with them. They call them Freemasons. They call them Illuminati. They call them the Skull and Bones. They call them the Rosicrucians, Knights of Malta, and so forth. But we don't have that. even during apartheid, the whites who established apartheid had their own secret society called the Afrikaner Broederbond, where every instruction, every magistrate or most influential magistrate, chief justice, or most influential people in the apartheid society used to belong to this secret society. Now, we don't have secret society. We have policies that make us more stupid. We say South Africa belongs to everyone. You don't find that anywhere in the world, not even in Zimbabwe, where it's supposed to be the poorest economy. But you'll never find anywhere where it says Zimbabwe belongs to everyone. Zimbabwe is for the Zimbabweans, Zambia for the Zambians, Europe for the Europeans, China for the Chinese, America for the Americans. That is just the way it is. It's a law of life, it's a human nature. But when it comes to South Africa, no. We have to contest this idea that South Africa belongs to everyone. Instead of South Africa is part of Africa and Africa is for the Africans. So we have laws that are, you can't find them anywhere in Africa. But it's because of the amount of white people we have here. So the latest about expropriation without compensation was brought in Parliament, a bill which made Trump very angry and Elon Musk, and then which finally caused the migration of 49 white people from South Africa to America, because they are fearing this compensation, this reparation process of expropriation without compensation, that we are taking our land and we're not giving anybody our money back. So this is a thing that Europeans don't want, that we're going to take over the oil pumping machines that is keeping the economy of Iran and other oil producing economies going. And of course, you will be assassinated. There will be attempts and all those type of things, because you're fighting the real fight, economics.
Yes,
now, you want to know about the ecology, who is benefiting from your ecology. So we believe that the land was taken without compensation, the land must be returned without compensation. We believe that the white man used superior weapon and the most violent weapon to dispossess us from our land. So it is time that we need to repossess our land, and based off on most of the negotiations that we had, even up until yesterday. People still negotiating about the peaceful transition from apartheid colonialism to the world.
Rastafari. My final question to the Eye, Majesty, is in this modern day that we live in now, in South Africa, you have a white-only zone, South Africa. How do you see that?
It's not only white-owned zone now. That is one of the earliest from 1994. They were granted by Mandela. It's called Orania. It's white-owned zone. But South Africa is a home to 44 African countries. There are some places are no-go areas for South Africans, are only for Nigerians and their drug dealing. There are some places are no-go areas for South Africans. There are places for Zimbabweans. Even chase away the South African police.
Wow.
There are some places in Port Elizabeth, a place called Koster. They are dominated by Somalis. The Xhosas are not allowed. There are some places in Venda there where the Asians, the Arab, they even have their own private airport and their landing strip, where the locals are not allowed. We've heard of places like that in Kenya where the Chinese build their Chinatown and the Kenyans are not allowed. So it's a continental problem that in as much as it is reflected in South Africa, because people have so much expectation and things to say about South Africa. But the truth of the matter is it can never be a responsibility of one country to unite the entire continent. You can't have the whole 44 African countries staying here, selling drugs, robbing poor people through their fake churches and their fake pastors from Ghana, Cameroon, Nigeria, and we call that Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism is about people who are loyal to Africa. Not these people. The past 3 weeks is a pandemic, even today. Somebody call you on WhatsApp and start to say, I'm with you on this and this WhatsApp group. I'm going to send you a code. Please send it to me. You send it back to him. You are hacked. And then they take over your number and they go around scamming other people in your name that, no, you are the one who's asking people money. But when you hear the voice of that is our Nigerian brothers. So this is not Pan-Africanism. When Africa has to be fighting the rest of Africans who think that, okay, we did support you during the struggle, so we are entitled to come into a country and sell drugs. We're entitled to come into a country and engage in human trafficking. We're entitled to do all this illegal abortion clinic. Abortion does not build any African society. You are killing future African children. And you're having these backward abortion clinics. But these are the things that people don't talk about when they talk about when they come in to go to the next subject, which is they called xenophobia. When they come to that, they're not talking about, is it xenophobia against what? It's just Africans who hate other Africans. It's just South Africans that they are so bad, But yet, there are cities in South Africa that are taken over by illegal immigrants. People who don't have legal right according to immigration system to be in this country. Undocumented. Lucky Dube, one of our greatest reggae musicians, was killed by one of those undocumented illegal immigrants from Mozambique. Difficult to trace because he has no fingerprints. He entered the country illegally and he has to be here because he's an African and this is Africa. We never had borders. Borders are Berlin conference thing. It is not true. We always had borders. Our borders were either landmarks, was either from one mountain to the other. We knew the land of the Zulus, where it began and where it end. We knew the land of the Xhosa, where it begin and where it end. We knew the land of the Xhosa, where it begin, or of the Bedis, where it begin and where it end. And we knew that once you enter into other people's territory, you must go and report your presence to the powers that be or the authorities of that land. You must go to the royal family and report to the king that I'm in your land, and they find out, why are you in our land? Did you kill someone there and run away and come here? Or you are being chased? What are the reasons? If the reasons are valid enough for them to accommodate you, they did not only accommodate, they protect you. They even contributed some cows to you. They give you a piece of land. They even give you a wife or two to start your life again. We always had that. But things were done according to rules. But this thing of trying to treat South Africa like a banana republic where there are no rules, you can do anything and everything that you can't do in any African country. Zimbabweans do what they can't do in Zimbabwe here. Mozambicans do what they can do in Mozambique. Nigerians do what they can do in Nigeria here. Now, if you saying a country that refused to be treated like that, therefore it's xenophobic, then our understanding of African politics are very skewed. If you're going to say, yeah, but you see, we also helped to liberate you. So you did liberate us so that you can turn our country into the largest drug market ever, or you liberated us so that we can all be free. But also, this statement is very faulty. Not every African country participated in our liberation. I was a liberation soldier. We were not allowed to pass Botswana with our guns to fight apartheid. Most frontline states of Africa did not allow us, not even Zimbabwe. The only country that allow us to enter South Africa with our guns, and that even allow us to have a military camp, and that even allow its country to be used as a front line to attack apartheid South Africa, was Mozambique. And in the process, it lost its president, Samora Machel. Which other frontline state? Why the Boers killed only Samora Machel? Why they didn't kill Robert Mugabe? Why they didn't kill Mswati? Why they didn't kill the president of Botswana, but they killed only the president of Mozambique? Because he was actively involved in our liberation. Other countries like Malawi, in 1972, Malawi was the first African country to recognize the apartheid South Africa and even establish an embassy for apartheid South African government in Malawi, whereby the president of Malawi, Hudson Kamuzu Banda, will not even allow you to transit with your dreadlocks. You have to cut your dreadlocks. Even if you say, I'm on transit, you have to cut your dreadlocks. They were not allowed. He was anti-revolution. He was a serious sellout. And then you have others who were double talking, who try to, when they go to the OAU, to the SADC, to the Liberation Committee, they try to sound like they are on our side, but which they were not. And the fourth factor is, why is it that Africa, with 54 countries, it took 53 countries 30 years to liberate one country? And after they liberated it, the only thing they can think about is to come and sell drugs in it, to human traffic its women. South African women are arrested all over the world because of their Nigerian boyfriend who made them, turn them into drug mule. You find them in jails in Thailand, you find them in jails in Brazil, you find them in jails in all of these countries that they were sent to go and carry the drugs there or take the drugs from there. And then we are the one country with a lot of unregulated fake churches by pastors from Cameroon. Omotoso is charged with abusing about 30-something women in his church.
Wow.
He's from West Africa. Bushir, he was siphoning money in tune of millions out of this country from Malawi. So I'm saying that when we think of these things, we must be broad and linguistic and inclusive. And I'm not saying that every African from other African country who's in South Africa is a criminal. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that 80% are criminals. And they are making headline of their criminality. There's another one who is a lecturer at the University of Johannesburg. He's from Zimbabwe. He said, yeah, you are not paying me well here in South Africa. I will make sure that all South Africans fail and all Zimbabweans pass. So you have people who are coming with a great vengeance. You have people who have already decided, South Africans, you are stupid if you don't allow yourself to be scammed, or you are xenophobic if you don't allow yourself to be kicked out and put in the periphery there, or you are something. It can't be correct that I've been to 18 African countries. Things that are done in South Africa, yeah, they're not done in any African country. In Ethiopia, for you to open a business, like how we have every second spaza shop is run by Ethiopians. In Ethiopia, for you to open a business, an Ethiopian must have 40% of shares in your business. Here, the Ethiopian is 100% owner of his business and paying the landlord or the people who have rented him a space peanuts. It's exploitation. It's going to create tension. And that is why there's so much tension, because this thing, all of these things is not guided by principled Pan-Africanism. The flow of movement of Africans in the country is not guided by Pan-Africanism. It's predatory Pan-Africanism, if there is anything Pan-African about it. It's very predatory. It's not progressive Pan-Africanism. It's a Pan-African. Johannesburg is the dirtiest city in South Africa and the most unsafest. You'll be marked. And crime is stratified. You know that those who take people's cell phone, earrings, gold chains, they are from a particular country. Those who are selling drugs are from a particular country. Those who are selling you invisible product in the form of religion are also from a particular country. Crime is stratified, is hegemonized, and it is specialized, it is specified. So it's a problem. It's a problem. And it can make even a staunch Pan-African to sound very skeptical. Yes, I am.
Rastafari. Yes, I can hear that the eye is very skeptical, my lord. And as everything that the eye outline, I understand the concern why the eye is skeptical, and the concern that the eye have, Majesty, which is rightly so. It's great to have the eye on the platform. It's been a royal fill of information over the passage of time that we've been here. You know what I mean? The eye bring so much memory. You know, there's so much I've learned from, from the eye, just listening, to the eye. I do hope that we can do this sometime again. You know what I mean? So, it's been an honor, and it's been a great pleasure, my brother, really hosting the high, and listening, and the eye sharing with Iman and my audience. I want to thank you, and I want to say manners and respect to yourself and your entire family. More love, more strength, and prosperity. Rastafari.
Rastafari. No, give thanks, my Lord, for hosting and even for having this reasoning. It's been a great pleasure indeed. And we hope that the viewers and the listeners will absorb it and take it in the spirit that it is presented.
Yes, I.
Usually when we say such kind of truth, some people will be say, yeah, you're xenophobic, you don't like us, you hate Africans. But me, I'm very realistic. I just analyze the situation as it is. As much as I'm a staunch African, like I tell you that I've been in 18 African countries, I love my Africa, I love my African brothers and sisters at home and abroad. But I know that as a Rasta man, during His Majesty's reign in Ethiopia, he built jails because he did not agree with crime. He did not promote crime. So I'm not saying because of we're talking about the free movement of Africans in Africa and the free trade, and the so-called opening of the borders, meaning to say I condone criminality. No, His Majesty never did. I'm not going to do that. We are not lawless people. We are lawful people. And sometimes I tell Rasta that, do you know that during Haile Selassie's reign, that ganja was also illegal in Ethiopia? Go and read the Ethiopian Penal Code. But because Rasta, is driven by belief than, is driven by faith than by facts. So unfortunately, we deal with factology, not faith or theology. Facts of history, study history and check how was things and why. Like I said, that His Majesty had jails in Ethiopia because he did not accept criminality. He did not like criminals. And that is the same thing. They are good Africans. We love them. But the bad Africans, like South Africans, there are a lot of bad South Africans who are criminals. We don't accept it. up until to our government is a criminal government. Our ruling party, the ANC, is a criminal organization that we refer to it as the African National Criminals and the African National Congress. So if I stay in South Africa, I was part of the liberation movement, and I can tell you that ANC is a criminal organization, and most of political parties in parliament are criminal. So what is wrong with telling you that my brothers in Nigeria who are selling drugs are criminals, and my brothers from Zimbabwe who are making Johannesburg a very unsafe place because they're taking away cell phone, they're calling the Uber or the Bolt, you go in there, then the next thing they take away your phone or whatever. What make us stopping from that? If we are going to correct Africa and apply critical thinking, it means we must also be critical of our own thinking.
True.
As Africans, that we must be critical of how do we think, how do you move from your countries and go to a country and try to turn it into a criminal state. What is goodness in that? Why do you want to create a country that is so unsafe, the most violent, the most dangerous, why is it necessary for us to have such kind of spaces? Why can't we shape Africa and South Africa according to the principles of one love, harmony, peace and love, all these things? We have them. Rastafari is one of those repository of these values. Ubuntu is one of those. African spirituality is one of those. So why can't we build a country and a continent based on principles of African spirituality? Rastafari and Selassie, we give thanks.
Manners and respect, peace and love. And that's
Peace and
where I'm
love.
going to end it. I don't need to say anything else more than thank everyone for tuning in. It's been an honor and a pleasure. Rastafari.
Mindset. Mind over matter.
Mind over matter. My Lord.
Yeah.
Peace and love.
Yes, man. Peace and love.
Honorable. Yes, I.